Hi, this is Joe Walensky from WritersUA, and I'm talking with some of the speakers that will be presenting at our Austin conference coming up in early January. And today I'm talking with Don Day. Hello, Don.
Hi, Joe.
Where are you talking to me from today?
I'm in Austin, Texas, so we're suffering a little bit of the cold dip that's coming down from Canada, but certainly not as bad as everyone else. It's light rain outside and appropriately dreary in here.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work? What kinds of things are you typically involved in?
Joe, I retired from IBM in 2010, and I've been a consultant since then. My um, domain that I'm particularly working on at the moment is advising on the use of structured content for website material, and in particular, enabling uh, better adoption of responsive web design. It's come on as kind of a buzzword and popular thing for speakers to talk about. But with all the discussion about adaptive content and responsive web design, there's been very little information about how to do it. So that's the area of experience that I'm involved in consulting on. And of course, it uh, the keyword DITA figures prominently in here. I've been associated with DITA from the very beginning, and DITA was designed for the web and happens to be very adaptable in this kind of writing. So I'm also working on some projects to enable structured writing through a web browser, creating DITA content for not only conventional um, web materials like web help or instruction manuals, but also for blogging with, for using to create narrative text like ebook content. Uh, the range of possibilities is really anything that's text-like and has a heading on it.
Well, you mentioned your long-standing work with DITA, and since you brought that up, I there had a couple related questions about that. So I teach a structured authoring and DITA class at the local college, and that's for beginning people that haven't yet worked with it. But I, I was just wondering to get your impressions. First of all, what you see as the challenges for people to get involved with DITA that haven't been involved with it in the past, in terms of what its value offering and how that presents itself, and then kind of follow up with that, it, maybe looking at people that are already deeply involved in DITA, are there any contemporary challenges that you particularly notice now, that those folks have in terms of their ongoing DITA development?
Well, let's see if we can parse that question a little more easily, Joe. Um, the the market for data has primarily been for the TechCom audience from the beginning of its introduction back in the early 2000s. And that particular market area is fairly well served by a number of vendors and a number of services and consultants that advise into that area. So that's a what I would call the short tail adoption community of DITA. But there's a long tail community of adoption that has not been well tapped yet. Even in an existing TechCom group, there are often opportunities to interoperate with teams that are creating content close by you, but they're not using DITA. And it would be one could capture that in structured form. So that would include programming teams. It might include your marketing organization in your company. It might include subject matter experts in the engineering or research departments who are trying to get their information into some form that can become a company asset, typically a knowledge base of some sort, and yet that information is also content that would be ideally suited to be made available for the TechCom community as well. And so the obvious um, apparent solution staring us in the face is, well, why not get them to use DITA? Uh, if you try that with a conventional DITA authoring tool, they'll probably throw up their arms and run away because of um, the very complexity that those tools expose for the type of writing that most tech writers are responsible for handling. But an SME, a subject matter expert, doesn't have to create um, links or conrefs, reusable content. They just need to create the content, and someone else can come back and add that material if they need to. We need to make those authoring environments as easy as possible. And basically, it falls down to creating structured authoring environments for them. And it could be as simple as a form that you simply fill in, and then the content gets pushed into a data topic for storage. To the extent that we can make the file format invisible behind the browser, that's the degree of success that we'll have in getting data out to more communities that haven't been using it before. So that's my passion, Joe, is hide the angle brackets.
And are there any new developments that you've been working on related to the Oasis did a standard?
So a little background on that too. Uh, you you mentioned awareness of my involvement with DITA, and that actually started with the creation of it in IBM. I led the work group that developed the specification that was eventually contributed to Oasis. Oasis is a standards organization that supports what they call vertical standards, and those would be the types of standards that support specific industries. DITA itself is actually flexible enough to support several verticals within the specializations in DITA topics themselves. But so we selected Oasis, and I was the chair of the technical committee through the first, I'm going to say, I did 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2 versions of the standard. Chris Eberline has the reins of chair now, and she'll be moving the DITA 1.3 standard into completion sometime next year. In the meantime, I'm working with Michael Priestley on a project called Lightweight DITA, which is taking the existing DITA standard and paring the architecture down to a very minimal form that closely aligns with the kinds of structures that authors might create if they were writing with HTML5. This gets really interesting now because in the world of HTML5, several new structural tags were introduced with that version of HTML, but there is no advice or schema coming from the W3C organization on how exactly to use those. So it actually falls to standards like DITA to provide the shell or the shape for the information types that authors need to create, and can then pump that into HTML5 structures. Lightweight DITA is an attempt to bring those two communities as closely together as possible, and hopefully lower the cost of entry and the cost of tools for working in that environment.
Well, that's a pretty interesting development. I look forward to seeing that as it starts to percolate out to us. Your topic at our event in January is from frame sets to responsive web design, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the theme of that and where the kind of the genesis of the
Mhm.
idea for that session came from.
Well, so everyone is talking about responsive web design. Um, and so when you asked me about the possibility of speaking at that, uh, one of the things I had been working on was um, uh, the adoption of existing available free templates, what are so-called CSS templates that are available for websites. And I had observed what I do with these templates is adapt them to the live DITA rendering system that I've got. An example is called jotsom.com, Jotsom, meaning jot some notes. You can go out there now and see a simple version of it, but I'll be spending some effort trying to get it live and online so that other users can sign up for it. But in essence, each content owner can select an available theme, and that's appropriate for the type of content that they want to develop for their area. So a blogging theme might have a right-hand column, and will have the kind of widgets that you use to identify authors and categories and date ranges. Whereas a theme that's selected for someone creating product documentation may have some JavaScript involved to do expanding and collapsing of the table of contents, possibly do some continuous scrolling of the content. And some of those themes that I had come across work very well for uh, the particular role of content that's used in um, user assistance. So I'll be using this particular presentation as an opportunity to talk about how I discovered those themes and how I'm adapting the live creation and rendering of data content into those themes to create uh, what is basically dynamic web help without frame sets. It's basically using a website as the frame set.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be an interesting session, and so I look forward to seeing you when I get to Austin in a few weeks.
Mm, absolutely.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk about this today.
I appreciate it, Joe, and hope you're able to stay warm with the weather out there.
Yep. All right. Bye bye. Thanks, Don.
Bye.